And it's this idea that a good literacy strategy across the school is going to have two sides to it. On the one hand, it's going to focus on what American researchers call content literacy. You could change the word content for generic, so whole school routines and practices. So it might be reciprocal reading strategies that we can apply to most subjects. It might be looking at academic tier 2 vocabulary. It might be how we are supporting students with their SPAG and so on. But we also then need to balance, because we need consistency, don't we? We need students to be getting that consistent diet. But we need then, at a subject level, to have a focus on disciplinary literacy. Because we know the way you think, the way you read, speak, write in all of these different subjects is tailored to what it is you need to know. It's tailored to that discipline. And actually, lots of subject teachers have never really had the opportunity to think about this. What disciplinary literacy is in the first place, but then what does it mean for them? And I suppose it's sharing with them what our end goal is. You know, we want to develop these strategic readers. What does that mean? You know, what does that look like in their subject? And it's not just about the what, it's about the how as well. So can they articulate a process for reading? What is it they do, you know, almost step by step in the classroom to take students through that process of reading? What do they do before they read a text? What do they do during? What do they do after? So it's what's the end goal? What do we need to know? But then how do we do it? And part of that, subject staff, is needing to go back to the evidence base around how pupils learn to read. So looking at the simple view of reading, you can look at the reading rope, you can look at the reading house. They're all similar, you know, there's little slight differences, but it's kind of inducting staff into that knowledge, really, because even English teachers didn't really have that. Funny is how long I've been in education this year, and at no point other than when I started to work for the Research School Network and the EF has anybody ever showed me how pupils learn to read or what I need to know as a secondary school teacher. So I think that's got to be the starting point for a lot of professional development back in school. And then it's about, well, how do we support the reading fluency and the reading comprehension of all our students in every single lesson? And it's about taking a nuanced approach. It might be a focus on reading fluency to support vocabulary acquisition in maths or science or geography or so on. It might be looking at reading aloud strategies in your tutor time reading programme. Okay, there are definitely inroads and ways into these things, but these are the kind of generic strategies that we need to think about. And then we need to move them into this. Well, how does a scientist read? What are the things they look for, think about, make notes on? And we've got to be really careful here. And there's a tendency in some schools when instructions are given right from the top, back from people who don't really understand the evidence base, that we don't shoehorn practices into subjects where that is completely irrelevant. So there was one question I had once around maths. We've been told by our senior leadership team that we've got to include some opportunities for reading for pleasure. Now, not really appropriate, is it? It's about having a balance across. It's about having a coordinated approach, and that means that you might not necessarily be focusing on exactly the same things in all subjects. So it's having a balance. It's not making assumptions about staff knowledge. And one of the things that I found really useful, and this is from Alex Quigley's Closing the Reading Gap. Sometimes subject staff don't have the understanding of language to articulate why their subject texts are so tricky. So the Arduous 8 helps them to focus on these 8 different aspects of a complex text. And the way I've used this before is, I've modelled this to them, we've annotated text together. They then gone away in their departments and looked at the text that they're going to use the next term, for example, and they've annotated them and prepared them together, because it's this idea. You shouldn't be cold reading with students. You've got to know your text. You've got to know why it's going to be challenging. So then you've got a chance of actually supporting that reading in the classroom. And it might be that you are looking at, okay, what are the subject challenges? So this text, a geography text, we know a geographer is going to be really interested in the contextual factors. They're going to have to read visual text as well as written text. They're going to have a balance of Tier 2 academic vocabulary and Tier 3 terminology. And then there are some really specific strategies that they're going to have to practice day in, day out. So switching, that code switching, summarising information, making connections in terms of places and prior knowledge, and so on. So there's got to be ways of doing that within a school, but somebody with the authority in school has to kind of lay those foundations to make that happen in the first place. And then a couple of other examples before we start to kind of wrap it up and go to any questions. Reading fluency was the campaign at the EF last academic year that I led on, and it stemmed from the fact that it was a key feature of the Key Stage 2 guidance report, but actually wasn't a key feature of the secondary one. And we were saying that there's so much evidence now that tells us that supporting reading fluency for older students is really crucial, because this idea of reading fluency, it's almost been thought as that bridge from word reading to reading comprehension. So it's not something that's just for the primary classroom, but we have to think about it in terms of our context and how we can make it work for us. So the question is, how can all teachers support reading fluency in a way that's suited to what their priorities are in the subject? So, for example, this one is a science example. We know one of the biggest challenges in science is the vocabulary and the demands and the huge range and volume of vocabulary. So it might be that we are supporting them to decode, to pronounce, to say these words and kind of encounter them really regularly. And it might just be kind of like I say, you say, we say it together, that choral chanting, that echo reading simply at word level.